Greetings and salutations, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about transmissions. As we all know, these cars come with MT-82 transmissions that are from China, and they don't do well very often. Especially when you start throwing more power at them, the stock MT-82s just don't do well. And so the point of this video is to tell you how to get a built transmission on a budget. So I recently just upgraded to a Stage 3 MT-82, Calimer Stage 3 MT-82. And I've had two other ones previously. So I've had a stock MT-82, I've had a Stage 2 MT-82, and now I have a Stage 3 MT-82. So I want to give you a little bit of the over the years, what I've experienced, how it's been for me, and how that could help you if you're going to set up something similar in your car. So the stock MT-82 in my car, very first transmission, is the one it came with. And that transmission lasted 100,000 miles, all naturally aspirated with some bolt-ons, and driven mildly, mostly as a daily driver. So at the time on that car, it had a Boss 302 intake, it had a JLT cold air, it was tuned by Bama at the time. It had, a shifter in it and a axle back exhaust, like just very simple stuff. And I never beat on it that much. I would drive it spiritedly sometimes, but most of it was just a daily driver, and that is what I drove to work for several years. That's how long that one lasted for. So at the end of the full bolt-on stage is when that transmission said bye. I think it was fourth gear in that transmission ended up, it would have a really bad grinding sound when you're trying to get it in fourth. The rest of the gears were okay, but yeah, the one gear went bad on some sort of more spirited shift. And so that was around 100,000 miles total on the car at the time. And that was, I don't know, 3 years or so of me having the car. And it did well at that horsepower level. So when you start adding the power, that's when it really had more issues. But yeah, the fact is, the first transmission, the stock one, it had issues after 100,000 miles and naturally aspirated. That's when that one let go. It was maintained well. I did change the fluids on it, and it did have an MGW shifter on it, but that's when that first transmission let go. Okay, so the second transmission, the Stage 2 MT-82, I got it on February 2nd, 2021, and back then it was cheaper than it is now. I paid in total $2,600. Pre-built one. I didn't send mine off and get it built. I got a pre-built one. I think it was ready in a week or two. It shipped, took like a week or so to get here, freight. And then I had a shop install that one for me. So I didn't know how the install process went or any of those tips or anything, but that was right before I put the Whipple on the car. So it was the end of the full bolt-on stage right before the Whipple. And it lasted from then, February 2021, up until now. So it lasted about 3 years at that horsepower level. With the Whipple, the car made 707 horsepower and 575 torque. There's a dyno graph that I don't know why I haven't taken down yet, but it's still here in my garage and shows the power levels at the time. And it did well. I would say in general, the Stage 2 MT-82 felt and shifted and everything it did just like a stock one. Didn't feel any different. In theory, the Stage 2 would hold up for longer. I thought it would last a little bit longer, but when I called about getting it fixed and potentially upgrading and stuff, what the representative from Calimer told me verbatim was that the Stage 2 is only made for about 500. And he mentioned how the Stage 2 is for a full bolt-on type car. So in theory, if you have a boosted Mustang, you need to go for a Stage 3 or another type of transmission. Okay, so then the stage 3 transmission, the Calimer MT-82 stage 3 is what I now have in the car. And I will tell you a little bit later in the video exactly how much I paid for it and how I got a good deal on that, because I did not pay full price for that transmission. Now I want to cover the tips and things that I learned installing the trans to share to you. So first of all, number one, don't skip out whenever you're doing transmission stuff. The very first thing, and I made this mistake, and I'm an idiot for even asking this, but I asked David from Coyote Direct, who is really good at giving advice, and he knows these coyotes really well. I was like, hey, the pilot bearing is still pretty new because I replaced it somewhat recently, and should I get a new one, and should I take the effort to get it out? And he was like, dude, it's like $15. Just replace it. If you're gonna have the whole transmission out and do all that work, just replace it. So I will regurgitate the same thing. I really did go to a local Ford dealership on my way home from work, and I think with tax it was $17. They had it in stock, and then bam, you have a new pilot bearing. If something was to go bad on that and you had to pull the whole trans all over again, you would hate yourself. So number one thing, just replace the pilot bearing. Me and my buddies, we did the trans replacement this time, and so the method we use is the bread method. It works great. I don't know what you guys use. You can use a lot of other things. There's a puller tool. You could use hydraulic fluid or something, but yeah, a bunch of bread, shove it in there, use a tool, smack it out, and it pulls the pilot bearing out, and you're good to go. So that's the number one tip, was do that. Okay, number 2 tip is bleed the clutch really good after you finish. Make sure that you don't have too much fluid in there, but do make sure that it is covering the port that goes down to the clutch. There's different ways to do it, but what I use is just a regular suction vac. It pulls like, a total of 30 for negative boost. And this is just an adapter of random sorts that I made, and it goes onto the top of the master cylinder there, and it pulls suction and it gets the air bubbles out from in there in the clutch. The other way to do it, which a lot of people I've seen have enjoyed this, is get the McLeod line, the braided line that comes with the bleeder down there on the bottom. I do have the McLeod line, but I don't have the bleeder on it. The guys rushed me into doing the trans a little bit quicker, and I probably should have just gotten the bleeder, but it does work great just like this. I just spent a solid 20 minutes or so going over and over and over again, making sure that it was really good. Pull suction on it, hold it for a while. You'll see the bubbles come through the line, make sure that it pulls, and then go in there and pump the clutch about 5 times. I'll do regular pumping of the clutch and then press my foot down and let it slide off, and it'll flick the pedal back and kind of helps get the bubbles out. And just repeat that process over and over again until it would hold vacuum and not pull any bubbles for at least a minute or so. And whenever that is solid and the clutch is solid and they both stay solid, then you're good to go. That took me a solid 20 minutes or so. Will probably be a little bit quicker if you did get the bleeder, but that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, clutch alignment tool. So my parts were all here. I thought I was ready to go. I'm excited to change things out. And then I realized that when you go to the stage 3, you have to get a 26 spline tool. So this is the RST from the 23 spline setup, and the 23 spline tool is not even wide enough. It's not even that the teeth are wrong. It's skinnier by like 1/8 of an inch or something like that. So you need a 26 spline tool. And I was, anxious to get things going. The guys are coming over, I think it was the next night or something like that, to come do it. So I didn't want to wait for shipping and everything, so I was like, I wonder how I can figure this out. So I found out that you can get from AutoZone, O'Reilly's, etc., just a Dorman clutch tool. And this is specifically Dorman 14523. That's the part number for this. And it fits exactly as needed. It's literally just the bigger brother of the 23 spline clutch tool that you need for a 26 spline clutch to put into the stage 3 MT-82. Word to your mother. I'll put the info in the description as well for those that need the number. Okay, and then a fourth tip from installing is watch out for the bolts hitting the shield. There's a shield that goes in between the engine and the transmission, and if it's a little bit off or it's a little bit tight, it can hit the bolts and be stripping the threads. And the transmission and the engine might be lined up right, but that shield might be hitting your bolts. So look for that. That was messing up the install and making it hard for me to get the bolts in. And it made it look like the trans wasn't lined up properly, but it was the shield. So that's tip number 4 from install. We got it done in basically 2 days. One night, I prepped everything. I lifted the car up on jack stands. I took the shifter out and I took the drive shaft out and pretty much prepped everything so that the next day, then we could just pull the trans. So, yeah, the next day, I think it took us like 4 or 5 hours, something like that in total. It was just me and 2 friends. One of them that just had surgery, couldn't even move that much on his back. He was standing here doing the jack and everything. And we pulled the old trans, put the new one in. I had the drive shaft and everything back on by like 1 a.m. I think we started at like 8 or whatever. So it's very possible to get it done in your garage on jack stands. You wouldn't have to have a lift, but it does take some effort. Also did not use a trans jack, just used 2 big jacks with some 2x4s and a lot of finagling and stuff, and got it to go in. It did take a good amount of effort, but for saving money, for paying a shop or getting a trans jack and getting all this extra stuff, I put a little extra elbow grease in and it worked out okay. One more thing. After you finish installing a stage 3 Calimer MT-82, you definitely need to do 2 things. You need to get a retune because the output speed sensor teeth count is different and your speedo will be off. So I didn't get it retuned right away. I drove it just to see how it was doing, make sure everything is seating properly and stuff. And whenever I was going 60 per the speedo, it was actually going 80 per Waze, because what I was using was Waze to check it. So get it retuned and then the speedo will be correct. And then the second thing is a crank relearn. And the reason is because the weights are all different, mostly because of the clutch and flywheel, but the engine computer needs to know what that weight is that it's spinning around in there. So that's why you do the crank relearn. It's not hard to do. There's tons of videos for how to do it as well. It takes, a couple minutes after you get the car up to temp. Well, a minute or 2 to get the car up to temp, and then you do the process, and that's pretty much it. Got it first time, good to go, done. That's pretty much it for tips. Okay, so the next thing to cover is, if I was doing it all over again, what would I have done differently for transmissions? What should you do if you have an MT-82 and it breaks? The very first thing you need to ask yourself is, what power level are you planning to build the car to? And then the second question after that is, do you want to build it in stages, or do you want to get that transmission that will be ready for your end goal? So if your end goal is to make 1,000 horsepower, I don't think it's very wise to get another stock MT-82. Some people have luck with it. They're really careful. They are perfect at shifting and it works, but also for how long? Because it's probably gonna blow up eventually. So let's say that you're keeping your car naturally aspirated with a bunch of bolt-ons and you're having fun and you're enjoying the car at that level. Just keep it with the stock MT-82. Take care of it, put an MTW shifter in it, put good fluid in it, make sure you maintain it, on the right schedules and stuff. And if your MT-82 blows, I'm sure you could find one from a junkyard, or you could try to source one from somebody that is upgrading to another one. It might not be the smartest use of money to go to a more expensive one if you're not going to build your car to that level. So that's the level there. Let's say, hey, you want to go boosted, so you want to run 10 psi middle of the road, a boosted Coyote. So you got a fuel system and you got some boost in there, and you're going to be making 6, 7, something like that, 600 horsepower. Maybe you want to upgrade. You should probably get Stage 2, Stage 3, look at T56, look at TH400, look at Power Glide, you know, start considering those options. But I think a lot of people, Coyote owners, we go on a budget and we're like, all right, what's the next step I can do? And the thing that's enticing about the MT-82s, especially Stage 1 and Stage 2, is you can keep the same drive shaft, you can keep the same clutch, you don't have to change because it's still a 23 spline clutch, same shifter, same cross member. If you have a drive shaft safety loop, it'll still fit on there. All that stuff carries over, you just need a different transmission. But from my experience, it seems like those don't hold up for that long, Stage 2s specifically, and eventually it's going to break, especially if you start driving harder and you make harder shifts and stuff. The stock gears, regardless of whatever work they have done to them, don't seem to hold up to that much power. And like I said a little bit ago, per Calimer, those are rated for about 500-ish. Those are higher level full bolt-on cars, and in theory, a boosted car needs more. So you can go in stages. So if you do jump from stock to Stage 2 and then Stage 3, then you just have to do a few more upgrades. You have to do clutch and flywheel and stuff like that. And so that's what I did. And I'll tell you right now, here's how much I paid for my setup. I have a buddy who built his car, built engine, big Whipple supercharger, had the Stage 3. He waited all the time for it, you know, because if you order a built one, especially the Stage 3, it can take a little while to get. You know, he has a Mantic clutch with it, so all the nice parts, like high quality stuff. And he is in California, and that car got state repped, and so he had to put it all back to stock. Car only had like 400 or 500 miles on it, and so I know it's a proven setup, and I know that it works really well. I trust the guy, and so I use freight shipping. I pick it up at the terminal, person drops it off, it saves you a lot of money. So the total freight shipping cost was, I think, $270 from California to San Antonio, Texas. And then I got the Mantic twin disc with the flywheel and the Stage 3 Calimer MT-82 with the slave cylinder still on it, actually, and already properly backspaced for that setup for $4,000 even. $4,000 and $270 in shipping, and I have a Stage 3 MT-82 with the built gears and you know, the more reliable setup. And the extra thing to add in there is that the billet gear set in the Stage 3 Calimer, that one is rated for 1,000 horsepower and 900 torque per G-force and Calimer. That's what those gears are rated for. It's not all 6 gears, it's gears 1 through 4, and 5 and 6 are stock gears that have been micro polished and worked over a little bit. But gears 1 through 4 are rated for 1,000 horsepower and 900 torque. So for me, that was great bang for the buck. I'm not super rich. This whole time I've been building this car on a budget, but I want good value for what I'm getting. So if you can find a deal like that, I recommend it. It worked out great for me. The total cost for a T56 brand new, with all the things you need to get it to work, you know, like you got to rewire it. Sometimes it's good to re-gear the back of it. You need a new drive shaft, new crossover. If you do a safe drive shaft safety loop, you need a new one of those. You got to have a bell housing for it, a new shifter. So in total, it looks like a T56 setup is about $7,000 to $8,000. And oftentimes people have really good luck with those and they make lots of power on those. And I drove one, it's fantastic. They feel great. But I still know of some cases where they do have problems. From the manufacturer, the gear set in a stock T56, which is what you get with that, you know, like a Lether Performance combo package for a T56, those gears are rated for 700 torque. So in theory, Calimer Stage 3 rated for 900 torque and a T56 with stock gears rated for 700 torque, the Calimer Stage 3 is stronger based off of the stats. Now, with that said, it's still an MT-82. So I'll tell you in just a little bit here my impressions of what it's like to shift this thing. But gears alone and numbers alone, what you pay for that, the gear set is rated for more. I will also say right now though, if you were to buy both brand new and you have to do the whole wait time to get a new Calimer Stage 3, they're almost the exact same price. A brand new Stage 3 with a clutch that has a 26 spline on it, and let's say you pay labor as well, like you're definitely at the same cost as a T56. But I know of one person specifically with a single turbo Coyote with a T56, a brand new one from Lethal, the whole combo kit package of what you need, and he did not have that many miles, like less than 500 miles on it, and it broke a gear. And that might just be a one-off thing, but what do you do? What do you pick? T56s are breaking, MT-82s are breaking. How do you choose the right one for your power level? Okay, so wrapping up the video, here's just some initial thoughts on my driving with the Stage 3 MT-82, and then I'll make another video later with 1,000 miles on it, review driving in the car with it, maybe some harder pulls, stuff like that, and like how it is inside the car. But initial impressions on the Stage 3 MT-82, I've put maybe 50, 60 miles on it, nothing crazy. It definitely feels different than a stock or Stage 1 or Stage 2 Calimer MT-82. It does feel different. The main thing that feels different is those 1 through 4 gears. They are buttery smooth. It really does like to be shifted more than the other ones. And when you start to warm it up more, it goes into gear so easy. There's a noticeable difference. It likes to be shifted, and even on power, you're in the throttle and you put that gear back, it wants to go in pretty well. People have mentioned the gear whine. There's barely any gear whine. If you are a car person and you complain about that gear whine, you got problems. Because it's a built trans. If I spent that much money on a trans and it didn't sound a little bit different, I'd be kind of disappointed. But yeah, with that said, it's a barely noticeable whine on decel whenever you're getting off throttle. You can hear a little bit of the whine from the billet gear set. It's a helical cut billet gear set, and so there's just a little bit of whine from that. Otherwise, 5th and 6th is the same. The engagement, that's all based off of the clutch, so that doesn't have anything to do with the trans. And then one other thing is the gears are a tiny bit longer, hardly noticeably longer. I have a 331 rear gear in my car because for a boosted setup, that's what I was wanting. And then now with the Calimer Stage 3, a little bit longer gears, really barely even noticeable. It kind of makes it nicer to drive because there's longer gears. You can stay in first and second for a little bit longer, whereas before first you're barely even in first at all, especially in a boosted car. So I like the longer gear set. I do think that it works out easy with this combination of transmission and rear gear. And I have heard a lot of people say that whenever they go for a T56, which is a little bit longer than the Stage 3 MT-82 gears, that they will often re-gear the rear because they want it to be more optimized for their setup. So that's initial thoughts. There's some of my tips and some of the things that I've learned from the process. I'm not a pro on this stuff, but that's my experience, and I just thought I'd share it because there's not a whole lot of info out there on reviews from people that have had these transmissions. And whenever you're looking to spend this much money and you're trying to figure out what to do, it's helpful to see advice from people. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to comment, ask any questions. I'll try to be as honest and open about whatever you're wondering. And then sometime soon, look out for a part 2 video on this, which will have a review, driving in the car, what it's like to shift it, and you get to see all that kind of stuff. I'll probably put the GoPro on my head. You can just see all the shifts and everything. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and y'all have a good day.
Bye.